Can France pass Europe's budget test? Well, that's one question we'll be looking for an answer for next week, and Sarah and Andrea are here to discuss it. Sarah, European countries have got to submit their budget plans to Brussels basically next week. Is that going to be a problem for some of them?
Well, it already looks like it's going to be a problem. France's draft proposal suggests that it'll have a 4.3% budget deficit next year, and the European threshold is only 3%.
Right.
So we're already setting up for this clash between Paris and Brussels. And if France doesn't get its budget deficit down to 3% next year, there'll be in serious non-compliance with the EU. And who wants to be in serious non-compliance there?
Is that a realistic threat, though? I mean, won't France just turn around and say, we're a big country, we'll ignore you?
Well, some sources have already said that the EU will actually reject this budget, so it seems like there has to be some kind of negotiations here. It's a way for the European Commission to sort of help the countries along in their adjustment processes to get their economies back on track. But with inflation low and low Eurozone growth, it seems like the countries actually they maybe need a bit more time to come into all these adjustment processes.
Okay, going to be interesting for investors to look at that, but we'll have some data next week for the
and
European economy
following
too.
on from that, so we've got the Eurozone inflation data, and that's expected on Thursday. It's the final release, so it's probably going to stay at 0.3%, which is a 5-year low. Is that correct? Now the issue is that the markets have become incredibly sensitive towards this data. It's disappointing, it's stagnant, it's flat, whatever you want to call it. The euro is reacting very poorly towards it. Markets have been awful, and then the markets have been reacting globally to this poor eurozone data, including inflation data. So we're very sensitive to this number, and of course we've got the issue of Germany, the powerhouse of Europe, and it appears to be struggling.
And what's the figure that we'll get next week on Germany?
So we have the
economic sentiment data, the SU, and Germany's been losing so much steam. People even talking about maybe we're seeing the powerhouse slipping into recession. And that doesn't really sound too great.
Right, people have been banding around the phrase technical recession, and when you're talking about technical recession and Germany, that's going to make everyone very, very nervous.
Yeah, and economic sentiment have declined recently, and we'll probably see a decline in October as well. And this is one of the first releases for October, so it'll be interesting to see if the weakness we've been seeing over the last 3 months, if it's actually continuing into the fourth quarter.
And there's some industrial production numbers for Europe as well, are there?
We've got industrial production as well, and I think the issue is that we're just so sensitive to all of this data. Plus, we've got the start of the earnings season. I think we should talk about that as well. And we know that everyone's been downgrading their forecasts coming into this, so we'll get some so-called beats. But let's be realistic about things. Things are slowing down.
Absolutely. One bright spot in Europe has been the UK, and we'll get more data there next week. Inflation, unemployment, what are you looking for there?
So inflation data, I'm just looking at my notes now, coming in at consensus 1.5%, probably around that level, and then we've got the unemployment rate 6.1%. One point of view that could be interesting is that we're getting into the political season now, aren't we, in the UK?
Course. Election next year, next
Precisely,
May.
And we had some interesting by-elections last night. So the figures will now be looked at within a political context, and I think that's going to be very interesting moving forward about how our current government, the coalition, is going to be talking about this data, how the main opposition, Labour, talks about its reaction to data and its reaction to the economy.
I mean, do you think that it makes it harder for the Bank of England to raise rates with an election coming up? I mean, they are independent, but maybe it gets more and more sensitive.
Well, it seems like from the forecast out there that the BOE could be they're enough to actually raise rates already in the first quarter of next year.
Yes, but they haven't done anything with the asset purchase scheme.
Right.
And so do we have to wait for something to happen there first? And how much time have they got? Because the election's scheduled for May next year.
They've already made it clear that they're really looking at wage growth, and they're saying they're looking at the bonuses that come out in February or January next year. So that's one of the main issues.
All right, politics, economics, we've
Lots
got it
to
all
talk
next
about.
week. Thanks, guys.